they are getting a little dissatisfied with some of the things the BDP is doing. But still, that's the main party. I'm going to talk a little bit about our foundation and how we operated and how we started. Back in 2006, I was on the telephone for a long period of time trying to get a hold of the director of libraries. And finally, after she'd been away for a while, I did get a hold of her, and she could not understand why somebody from America is all of a sudden on the telephone offering to build libraries in their country. And it took a lot of convincing, and finally she invited me to come, and I went there, and we spent about 2 weeks traveling throughout the country visiting libraries. And the picture you see up here is one of the libraries that we visited. Many of their libraries are in disarray with a lot of old books because putting in new books is not part of their program in many cases. And a few of their libraries are new, they're very big, probably overbuilt because they don't have the staff to run them, but some of them are nice facilities. They have approximately 27 libraries and 67 reading rooms. The reading rooms are probably the size of a 10 by 12 room times 2. So they're very small rooms with books that get put in there. Again, they're generally old. In a few cases, the librarians or the ladies or gentlemen that run the reading rooms who are not librarians are very effective, but for the most part, the reading rooms just sit there and are not well used at all. This is the size of a reading room. I'll go back to that. So in finally coming up with a memorandum of understanding, which Sarah mentioned, where we would build the library and they would provide the staff and the books and the furniture, we came to an agreement and we started to build our first library in '07. The process of picking a library site is very important. And in picking a library site, you want to make sure, and as we're now on our 8th library, we've learned from every experience how to do a better job of picking a site. And you can interview, but you really have to do a lot more scouting of what's going on in the village that they'll really appreciate the library and really take advantage of it. And we started out with Build a Brick program where everybody in the community would donate a brick, even though it'd only be maybe $1 worth of expense to them, which is a lot of money to them, that they would take responsibility for that being part of their library. We found that to be a difficult thing, and so what we've ended up doing recently is when we meet with a village committee, which this would be a typical meeting inside one of their kotlas, is we would ask them that you need to be partake in doing something for this library site, and we let them choose. And often they will build a little cultural building or a rondavel where they can show some of the culture of their country. And we find that a more effective way than telling them how we think they should be contributing. We also look to have the library centrally located, a very big problem in Botswana because a village can be like a large city. They have so much land that the village is very spread out. It's not like South Africa where everybody's in a little tight area in a township. So to get the central area of a village, it's very hard to determine what the central area is. So we tend to pick the area where the kotla is, where everybody comes for their weekly meetings or monthly meetings or disciplinary meetings or weddings or whatever. And so we've told them that it has to be land near the kotla or we can't build the library. We also need to have electricity. This would be another village in a kotla, and you can see the colorful women and men. And this is the smallest village that we've built a library in. In fact, it's the one that we're going to open up in November, and we had the largest turnout. And we feel probably one of the strongest about this village because there's a lot of community involvement. In fact, when we made a presentation to them, I had to do the presentation 3 or 4 different times because of the fact that so many people, first of all, had never seen a computer before, and they wanted to see what the previous libraries looked like. So meeting with people and showing them what we're going to do, getting their ideas is very important. On the first library, in this picture back here, we actually showed a very superficial drawing and got their input, what they thought would be important for a library. And we would try to take some of their ideas to implement in the design. In designing a library, you say, well, how did you design your library? Who came up with the design? Well, over a period of several interviews and meeting many different people, we went finally to Habitat, who has an office in Botswana, and said, who do you use as your architects, or who do you recommend? And they just so happened to have an architect on their board that really understood what a nonprofit foundation is trying to do in building something that would be economical, cost-effective, and something useful for the people. So we've been working with a gentleman by the name of Carl Bauer for the last 6 years, and he's just been terrific. He's now moved on to England, and his partner is now helping us, and they really understand what we're doing. Their price to us was very reasonable, and it's been very helpful. In picking the library site, again, this is meeting with the community out in the site, trying to get a central location, and they get all involved in picking that site. So we're very involved in the community, and we don't do it from afar, we're actually there. This is a picture. I'm getting sound, I don't want sound. This is a picture of the president and myself, and Sarah's, I think, to the left, you can't see her. But we got to meet with the president after building our first library. And we had a particular question to ask him. We were showing him a slideshow of the process of us building a library. And these were all people in the library community that came to visit at the president's office. His name was Festus Mohai. He's no longer the president. He was the president for 2 terms, and they only are allowed 2 terms, just like our country. And then we have a new president called Ian Khama. His grandfather was the founding president of, or his father was the founding president of Botswana, and his grandfather was the one that went to Queen Victoria. So it's an interesting history. Anyway, the reason we were in Botswana was because of Sarah's experience with Matlako. That was the village where she did Habitat for Humanity. And the village did not have electricity. And electricity was key to our libraries because we have fans, sometimes we have air conditioning, we have a kitchen, and we have lights. You need to have electricity. And solar is really not quite enough. So I said to the president in my quiet, innocent way, we got to make a deal with you. We'll build more libraries, but you've got to get electricity to Matlako. And Matlako was not scheduled to have electricity for 2 or 3 years. On the scheduled plan of every village eventually will have electricity. And he didn't say anything. He was extremely quiet. 2 weeks later, we were reading in the newspaper, Matlako's getting electricity. So it was a very exciting thing for us, and it shows you that you cannot be shy and ask for things if they're the right things to ask for. So we felt very good about that. This particular picture here you're looking at is actually a picture of the Matlako Library. The thing on the right is called a rondaval, and this was there, and we kind of rebuilt it a little bit because it was falling apart, where they show cultural things. And the thing in the foreground you're looking at we always put in a playground. A playground is essential for a library because what does it do? It brings small children to the library. We were hoping it would bring mothers and fathers, but we at least are getting the small children. So that's a good start. Okay. We also, in developing a library site, we meet with the chief. We want to make sure that the chief is somebody that really is going to take on responsibility of the library and make sure it's functional. In some cases that has not happened and we've been disappointed, but in many cases it has. And another thing is we want to have volunteers. And volunteers in a developing country is a very, very difficult concept. Why would somebody volunteer if they're poor? Why would somebody volunteer if they don't have a job? So volunteers expect to be paid, and we are not going to pay volunteers. That's not in our scheme of things. And so what we're trying to do is work with the librarians to teach the young children to be volunteers so that it becomes a cultural thing for them to realize the importance of volunteering to make things better for their community. And I suppose there's a case where we're really kind of putting our value system on them, but I think it's the right value system as far as volunteering is very important in a developing country. So it is meeting with some success. And one of the librarians puts little badges on the children. They're responsible for cleanup or putting books away. And pretty soon it becomes a thing that and young kids love to volunteer. It's the older people that have learned maybe that's not so much fun, even though all of us in this room seem to think it's fun. So we would love that culture to be there. I think another thing that we have learned the hard way is you cannot change a culture. And if you think you can, you're mistaken. And what we've learned to do is to learn from their culture and to modify what we think and adapt what they think is important for their culture to make it work. And that's a long, tough process, especially for me, because I'm impatient, as I told you, and patience is critical in working with another culture that you don't quite understand. So that's something we have learned, and I think all of you, the young people in this room, when you're in a country, you have to realize that they're not interested in your culture, they're interested in their culture. And you really have to spend some time figuring out what that is. And that's a long process. And it goes way back. In the case of the people in Botswana, it goes back hundreds and hundreds of years of what they've learned in their tribes. And remember, they've just come out of a tribal existence to now the New World, which is not always the best, but that's what's happening to them. And so, but they're still living with the ideas of their culture. It's interesting, Christianity has played a big role in Botswana. I think 70% of the people in Botswana are considered Christians, or consider themselves Christians. But if you look at their religion and you go to a church and see what's happening, it's a mix between their old culture of religion and present culture of religion. And of course, the U.S. has had an impact. Do you have a comment on that?
No.
Am I taking too much time? Okay. 25 minutes?
That's okay.
Okay. Okay. Speak up.
My 1 minute is now 30 seconds.
No, you're allowed lots of time. They told us we could be here 4 hours. The next thing I want to talk about very quickly is networking. In going to Botswana, or one more thing, in talking about design, one of the things that we thought, and we found this in South Africa, is the design of the walls where it would let in natural light. And the reason you want natural light in a country like Botswana is power is not as dependable as it is here. So when power is out and it's still daylight, they can use natural light for people still to be able to read and utilize the library. So this is a concept called wind block, which was invented by an architect in South Africa who we met. This particular lady on the right is Sister Mary Frances. And Mary Frances is a lady that I met back in, 08 or 07, when we were having trouble with the first contractor that we picked and we were wanting to switch to another contractor. And we were told that she was a networker and a connector. And I was able to find her in a remote village near where we were going to build the library in Matlako. Met her, and she's just a lovely person. She's been in Botswana for 35 years. She's from Australia. She's a nun, and just a lovely, lovely person. And 15 minutes after I left, I get a phone call, and she says, "I've got a contractor for you." And this contractor has been with us to date, and he's been terrific. And anytime we need help, she'll go visit one of our libraries to kind of spark it up, to work with the librarian, to bring people there. She's just a terrific person to help. And so we've helped her, even though I'm not Catholic, we've helped her with her church, and she's had a big impact on helping us and are helping Botswana with our library. So it's always important when you're going to a foreign country to find out who those connectors are and networkers are, because they can be such a big help in making life much easier for you when you're trying to accomplish something. The person on the left is the new superintendent of our company. That's Sarah. She's had a lot of experience with leveling up fence posts and is helping. And this gentleman on the right is our contractor. And so this is the library that's about to open in November, and she's helping him level up the fence post. For the first thing we do when we build a facility is we build the fence around the library for security. Everything is done by hand, and this is building the excavation, the trenches, and we always utilize the local people for construction. The contractor is agreeable to that, and so he hires the local people. We do not bring in outside people, except maybe the electrician or the plumber. Everything is done by hand. Again, this is a giant load of cement. We don't have cement trucks. Everything is done by hand and mixed by hand. That's mixing cement. Every bit of cement slab on the floors, for the brickwork is all done by hand. This is starting up of a library, and you can see these wind block, the ones with the windows. This is a typical playground, and the person going up the playground is the chief. I think he'd never been on a playground before, so he thought he'd try it. This is a place where we are doing landscaping. Every library we landscape, we bring in the flowers, and we expect the local people to do the gardening and plant the plants. And these are local ladies and men that all came when we brought the plants in to plant around the library. And that's what the library looks like after it's been landscaped. This is about 2 years old. And you can see the wind block from the outside of the building, how that brings in light. Also, this is building one of their cultural centers that was built by the local women on this same library site. Your turn.
I don't know what slide.